I'm a huge fan, and I wanted to share something that stuck with me for years. My name is Harlow, and I'm 18 years old. But this happened when I was 14. I was visiting my grandfather, who owned about 20 acres of open field and woods. That day, I was with my crush, Colton, and we decided to ride his four-wheeler out to his favorite fishing spot on the property. At first, everything felt normal, but the moment we got there, I began to feel wrong. The woods behind us were completely silent. There were no birds, no insects, nothing. The only sound was the slow movement of the water nearby. It was the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, like the world is holding its breath, and that's when we heard it. It was a scream, but not like anything I had ever heard before. It sounded like a mountain lion, mixed with a fox, high-pitched and guttural at the same time. It echoed through the trees, sharp enough to make my chest tighten. Colton looked at me, fear written all over his face. "What the hell was that?" he asked. I don't know," I said. I barely got the words out before we saw it. Standing, just at the edge of the tree line, was something. It was tall and unnaturally thin. Its skin was pale as it had never seen sunlight. Its face, or what should have been a face, was wrong. Just two jet black, hollow pits for eyes, and a long, dark slit where its mouth should be. For just a second, we were frozen. Then it moved. It lunged towards us with terrifying speed. We didn't think, we just reacted. We jumped onto the four-wheeler and took off, the engine roaring as Colton pushed it as hard as he could. It felt like something straight out of a horror movie. Branches whipping past us as we sped toward my grandpa's cabin. We barely made it inside. The second we slammed the door shut, Colton threw his weight against it, trying to hold it closed. Then something hit the door. Hard. Before we could even process what was happening, a long, clawed hand punched straight through the wood and through Colton's hand. His scream still haunts me. And then, just like that, it stopped. No more banging, no more noise. When we finally got the courage to move, whatever had been outside was gone. Later, my mom came and picked us up. We never really told her the full story, just that Colton had hurt his hand. But I don't know what we saw. It wasn't normal. It was definitely supernatural. I still think about it sometimes. About those black, empty eyes watching us from the tree line. If anyone knows anything, if they know what this could have been, I'd really like to understand in the comments. Hello, my name is Ree, and I was hoping you could tell my story about the Dogman. I've actually encountered it 3 times. At least I believe so. The first time was around 3 a.m. I was on my way to a friend's house because she and her boyfriend were fighting. I was going to go pick her up and take her out of there. Out of nowhere, this huge dog thing runs in front of me in the road. So I slammed on my brakes. When I looked up to make sure I didn't hit it, the dog stood up on its hind legs just like a human would, and then it walked off into the direction of the woods. At the time, I just figured it was because it was 3 a.m. and I was tired. I thought maybe I was just seeing things. The second time I saw it was around 5 a.m. on Duncan Road in Pineville, Louisiana. I was riding my friend's street bike when I saw what looked like someone standing in the road. I stopped and lifted my helmet shield to see it better. That's when I realized it wasn't a person at all. It was that same dogman creature I had seen before. As soon as I recognized it, it dropped down on all fours and ran into the woods. I immediately turned around and went back to my friend's place. The third time was the most intense. My friend Manny and I were driving to my friend's house down Esler Field Road. Suddenly, something huge ran out in front of us. I covered my face and screamed, while Manny just sat there in shock. At least, I think he did. I couldn't really see. With my face still covered, I asked him, "Did we miss whatever it was?" He quietly responded, "It stopped us." I was so confused, so I asked, "Is it okay to look?" He said, "Yeah, I guess if you want to see bright yellow eyes and a pissed off creature." That made my stomach drop. Slowly I uncovered my face. The dogman was walking towards the woods. When it reached the tree line, it dropped down onto all fours and disappeared. We rushed to my mom's house, and as soon as we got onto the porch we heard this ear-piercing howl. To this day, I still wonder if I'll ever run into that creature again. In early winter of 1996, I was dating a girl from the Tonto Apache Reservation in Payson, Arizona. After leaving the reservation at about 3 a.m. in the morning one day, I made a right-hand turn from the res to go back into town, before the stoplight and the big casino were built, and saw the scariest thing I had ever seen in my life. Off to my right, out to the big ditch just on the edge of my headlights, I saw a very strange and intimidating creature. The creature looked to be a man at first, but I quickly realized it was not a man. This thing slowly walked from the right-hand shoulder, off the road to the center of the right lane of traffic. It slowly walked across and in front of me, staring at me the entire time, looking straight into my eyes. This thing had the body and torso of a well-developed man, yet it was covered in fur, that which resembled the fur of a coyote or a wolf maybe. The torso was muscular, and then I noticed that this creature did not walk on normal legs. It had hind legs similar to a deer's legs, and walked on hooves. Lastly, I noticed the creature had the head the size of a man, with a small snout like a coyote's, dog's ears, and eyes very piercing, illuminating grayish blue. These eyes were definitely not of human origin. Remember, this was at 3 a.m. in the morning, and before the lights of the big casino or the street lights in southern Payson were even around. Its eyes literally glowed, and it stared at me as it made its way into the second lane of traffic, which was off to my left-hand side. It then stopped and stared at me as I drove slowly by it. The whole time, I had eye contact with this thing. I had to add that even though this incident did happen, I felt like I was the only person on Earth at that moment, and that this creature knew everything about me. Everything I ever was and everything I ever would be. It owned me in every way. It seemed as though the entire world went into slow motion and I was meant to see this thing. As I passed the creature, I broke eye contact with it, shifted gears in my truck, and hauled ass through town to my home on the north side of Payson. I could not even take my eyes off the road and was afraid to even look beside me. As stated above, this thing owned me in every way. When I arrived home, I literally had to call my father on my cell phone and have him turn on the porch light and step outside of the house before I could make it through the dark into the porch light. I was that scared. I tried to explain to my father what I had seen, but I could not stop crying because I could not stop replaying it in my mind. When I could finally talk, I explained what I had seen, and my father agreed to go back with me first light to see if we could find any sign or fresh tracks that would help me explain my experience. I'm a fourth-generation big game hunter, and I was raised in the backcountry hunting and fishing. Even though, at first light, we would go check the tracks, I knew what I saw was not human. We sat up until daylight and headed toward the res at first light. As expected, there was no fresh tracks and no fresh sign of anything. I did not go back and see my girlfriend for some time afterwards. It was almost a week before I could go back out there without freaking out. When I went back and told my girlfriend what I had seen, she did not seem too surprised and began trying to explain a few things to me. She then stated that her father needed to talk to me ASAP. I waited for a few days to go up there and see him. But when I did, he brought me into his room, and when I told him what I saw that night, he told me what I had seen was a skinwalker. I can tell you that shortly after that, I unfortunately had to leave that girlfriend for unrelated issues, I assure you, and I have not gone back on the res ever since. NASA is hiding something terrible. This story occurred a few years ago in 2019. I, at the time, was a senior in high school. I live in South Mississippi near the NASA-owned Stennis Space Center. Here, they do test rocket engines for future space travel. Since the rocket's engines are known to create a large blast, there are thousands of acres of dense pine forest around the testing area to hold large game such as deer and wild hog. On a seemingly warm and humid night in mid-September, I decided to trespass in the buffer zone to try my luck at bagging a wild hog. I was using an AR-15 with a night scope. Around 11 p.m. I exited from I-10 onto some back roads that took me to more minor logging roads, leading into the buffer zone. I parked my truck outside the buffer zone just a bit and started my 2-mile walk into the pines. I found a tree I liked just off the dirt road and set up my overlook over the street, and a large field left over from the logging field. Not even 10 minutes into the setup of my tree stand, I see a set of headlights flashing amberly. Shit. I must have set off some motion detection or have been spotted on a trail camera. I held tight in the tree, and the car stopped a few hundred feet away from the road. I can make out the word security on the side of the vehicle through my scope. 2 men get out and one sparks up a cigarette. "Probably just some kids," I hear one of them say.
"Want to look around?"
the others say. I couldn't help but notice the nighttime noises you usually hear slowly fade away, and both men grew uneasy by the looks of it, and without a word they got back in their car and drove away in a hurry. Huh, that was odd, I told myself as I realized that no noises were coming from the surrounding forest, not even the cool breeze that usually flows through the pines. Like clockwork, I hear a deafening howl or a scream. It was a blood-curdling screech that sounded like a crow if it would howl like a wolf. I grew up on the bayou and had Native American blood, so honestly, I've heard many stories of the Rougarou and other folk stories. I've spent plenty of time in the woods and have never heard any noise like it. I'm a big guy now. I'm 6'4", 220 pounds, give or take, not to mention I have an AR-15. But just then I crapped myself. I quickly dropped down the tree, scraping myself badly, and began walking fast to get out of there. Before I exited the clearing, I scanned the field with my night vision scope, and there I saw it, maybe 100 yards away, staring me down. A sizable, coyote-looking animal. We don't have wolves, so that was out of the picture. But this thing was huge, and it looked almost human in some places. Its hands were spotty with mangy fur. It was patchy with whiter gray skin under it. I hauled ass, and I was not going to stay and try to be the badass guy from the movies who hunts and kills the mysterious creature. I ran for maybe 15 minutes until I could see my truck ahead. It was a white truck, so it reflected well in the moonlight. I couldn't help but notice what sounded like another pair of footsteps running with me. I wasn't stopping to try to see what it was, and my goal was to get to my truck and never look back. As I got to my vehicle, I fumbled with my keys because it was an older truck and didn't have a remote unlock. When I got in, I started it and flipped on my light bar. I could see a set of glowing orange eyes staring at me, right in the front of my windshield. I stepped on it and drove 15 minutes to my house, where I got home and could not sleep. In the days following, I asked my buddy's dad, who I'm close with, who works as an essential guy over at the Stennis in the security department. He just shrugged it off and almost laughed about it. I have a feeling he knows what it was, and since then I haven't heard any other stories about it. But I have heard other stories about Stennis Space Center, like creepy men dressed in all black suits darting into the forest. Almost like that video that surfaced a few years ago of all those faceless guys in suits on the side of the road. I've heard some similar stories to mine, but nothing exact. Please let me know what you think of these odd encounters. My mom has worked at a small, rural hospital for about 6 years. She is the ER receptionist. She is the first person you see when you come into the emergency room, the one that will give you all the paperwork to fill out and such. Throughout the years that she has worked there, she primarily has worked nights, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and has seen quite the cast of characters the town has to offer. Every transient, druggie, and local has passed through that lobby at some point, and she has seen each of them at least twice. But one night she encountered something she had never seen before. My mom was quick to get the hang of things in the first year, so she was left alone to work the counter. The ER faced the parking lot, so she could see people coming in far, far away, and anticipated their moves. One night at about 2 a.m., she was working on her computer, looked up, and was surprised to see 2 people standing there. A man and a woman were just standing there, staring at her. and she stared back. The parking lot was dark, no car in sight, and they just appeared. After a long moment, they entered the lobby and went up to the desk. My mom said the alarm bell started going off in her head and something was just not right. For one thing, they were very tall. The desk my mom sat at was easily mid-chest to an average person. With these people, my mom could see the woman's pelvic bone. They were dressed for hot summer weather because it was the summer. They were also very skinny, and my mom emphasized this. They were very dry looking, but they didn't look like your typical druggies. The woman stroked her neck with long fingers, saying she had a sore throat. My mom didn't say a word for the first and only time. She just looked at them. A phrase kept repeating in her head. Strigoi. As my mom looked at them, the woman looked at the man, then looked back at my mom, then to the man again, the whole time just smiling and stroking her throat, and said to the man, "Do you think she will let us through, or should we go somewhere else?" My mom stayed silent as the woman repeated the pattern of looks. They both smiled at my mom and left. Almost immediately after, my mom texted me asking if vampires needed permission to enter places like hospitals. I told her that since she was technically the person to say who went back to the ER, they would need her permission. We both knew that Strigoi was a type of Romanian vampire myth that normally we thought wouldn't be really, true. But she kept hearing that phrase in her mind. She has never seen that couple again, and we still talk about what happened every so often. It does make me wonder when I hear about stories of black-eyed children and other tales of vampires. What did she see that night? And how close was she to something unreal? Fresh out of high school, my friends and I decided to take one last trip together before we all split up to go to college. The Pacific Crest Trail was the destination. A few nights of drinking, hiking and camping was exactly what we needed together. Ian, my boyfriend, picks me up from my house. I've never been to the Pacific Crest Trail, so he tries describing its beauty the best he can. "Babe, you're gonna love it, I promise. Nothing but fresh air and wilderness. We will be one with nature." I'm not so sure Mother Nature would approve of the ungodly amount of alcohol you have in the cooler. Well, what about this? Ian pulls out a sandwich-sized Ziploc bag of weed. I know Mother Nature would approve of this. She grew it. "You've been holding out on me," I said, snatching the bag from his grip. I open it and take a deep breath, inhaling the familiar aroma. It's a long ride. Might as well roll one up for the road. Sounds good. I'll call the others and get them to meet us at the location. Ian connects his phone on his Jeep radio, putting on his 80s hair metal playlist. I light the freshly rolled joint, and we settle in for a road trip. We decided to meet up at the Bridge of Gods. The Bridge of the Gods sits at the convergence of the historic Columbia River Highway State Trail, 3 National Historic Trails, and the Pacific Crest Trail. We walk over the bridge together, being extra careful because there is no shoulder on the narrow bridge, and we must share with cars and trucks. We make it across with no problem and hike for a while until we decide to go off-trail to find a spot to set up camp by the river. 3 tents between 6 people. Nova and his girlfriend Tessa, the twins, Sadie and Katie, and finally myself and Ian. I sit back with a black cherry white claw and take in the beautiful, beautiful surroundings. The sky let out an orange glow as the sun sank behind the jagged mountains. The mountains came down to meet the cold, untamed river. Nova and Ian began to make a fire before the night came. As the darkness falls, the alcohol flows. The flicker of the flame lights the night. We all reminisce about high school and talk about all that we would like to do for our future. Ian gets quiet and stares off into the darkness that is the river. "What's up, Ian?" I ask. I think I can see the outline of a boat floating not far off the bank. We all look in that direction. Ian pointed. "Yeah, I think I see it too," Katie said. Nova walks over to his backpack and pulls something out. He twirls it in his hand and looks at it for a moment, before putting it in the direction of what we think is the boat. "Is that a gun? Put that up, Nova." I spoke. "Chill out, Brittany. It's just a flare gun," Ian said as he grabs my hand to calm me. Nova pulls the trigger, and a trail of light streaks out towards the boat. It lights up the immediate area around the dark outline. It was a boat. Not just our mind playing tricks on us in the dark. 2 people stood in the flat-bottomed boat, looking our way. They wore orange hoodies that hid their face. "Oh my god, people are watching us," Sadie said. "Get the hell out of here, you damn weirdos," Nova shouted. Nova and Ian began picking up rocks on the riverbank and throwing them at the boat. After a few moments, we could hear the engine start and drive away. We finally get over being freaked out. We did our best to put the incident behind us and continued drinking and partying throughout the night before eventually passing out in our tents. I woke the following day to a commotion outside. I unzipped the tent and dragged myself out. The sun hit my eyes and I winced as a sharp pain shot through my head. Drinking obscene amounts of alcohol seems like a great idea until the next day, when you have to wake up with a splitting headache and you get a queasy gut. I see Ian with his hands clasped on top of his head, standing in front of a flat-bottomed boat and sat on the riverbank on our campsite. "Ian, what's wrong? What's going on?" I asked. "These assholes from last night, they docked their boat here, stole all of our supplies while we were sleeping." Nova walks up behind us. "I'm having trouble finding the trail. I have some food and water stashed away in my tent. Let's refuel and go look like a group." After eating, with no supplies, we decided to cut our trip short, pack up, and look for the trail we strayed from to get to this riverbank. "Let's split up," Nova said. "We can go in pairs of 2. Try not to stray too far from the others, so if you find the trail, you can alert the others by yelling." Nova and Tessa enter the woods. Sadie and Katie enter about 20 yards away, and Ian and I do the same. Ian grabs my hand and he leads the way. We say nothing to each other, only the sound of twigs breaking and brush under our feet fill the silence. "I think I see something," Ian said. I look around to try and see what he sees, and that's when I notice it. I think we both figure out what it was at the same time by the terrified look we gave each other. To our left, a man in a bright orange hunting hoodie stood several yards away. He didn't move. He just looked at us. A camouflage ski mask covered his face. He didn't move even when we ran into the opposite direction of him. Even without being chased, we ran as fast as we could, leading to me tripping over some undergrowth and falling. My extended hands were the only thing stopping me from slamming my face into the unforgiving ground. A sharp pain shot through my wrist into my elbow. I let out a yelp in pain. I'm not sure if it's broken, but I know it's at least sprained. The price I had to pay to save my face from colliding with the forest floor. Ian quickly comes to my side, helping me up and inspecting the hand. I held it close to my body. He flexed the wrist, sending a shockwave of pain through my arm, causing me to jerk my hand away. Behind him I noticed some movement. It was one of the men in the orange hoodie stepping out from behind some trees. I point the shaky finger behind Ian at the man. Ian glances over his shoulder to see what has me so shaken. "We'll check this out later. Right now we have to run." Ian grabs my elbow, careful not to touch my hurt wrist. We make a hard left and quickly make our way to what is hopefully the trail we came in on. We break through the trees, but it's not the trail. It's a small clearing. It looks like someone has recently been here. A still smoldering fire set in the center of the small clearing. Sadie and Katie break through the brush into the clearing a few feet away from where we came in, followed by Nova and Tessa shortly, to the right of where we came in. We all share stories, and they all sound very similar. "These men funneled us to this spot," Katie said. "Why do they want us here? What do they want?" Nova responded. "Well, you did shoot a flare at them," I say to Nova. "The creeps were floating there watching us. What was I supposed to do?" "Stop fighting. It'll get us nowhere. We need to figure out how to get back to the trail," Sadie interrupted. We looked around the clearing. It was roughly about half the size of an NFL football field. There was nothing out of the ordinary other than the smoldering pile of coals left behind. "Let's turn around together and enter the woods and search for the trail. It has to be close," Ian said. We began to walk towards the section of woods we had entered the clearing through, and several of the men with orange hoodies and camouflage masks stepped out of the tree line. We turned as a group and began running in the opposite direction. We got halfway to the other side of the clearing before there were more men wearing the same orange hunting hoodies and camouflage masks stepping out. More emerged from the tree line surrounding us. I'm pretty sure there were 12 of them in total. Some of them had rifles in hand. Our group huddles together as it looked like these hunters were slowly closing in around us. 2 hunters grab the twins, Sadie and Katie, and begin to drag them away, kicking and screaming. Ian and Nova run towards the 2 hunters that grab the twins. Nova throws a punch that connects with the hunter's chin and drops him to the ground. Nova grabs Sadie by the hand to help her up when a loud boom fills the air. The unexpected explosion temporarily disorients me. My ears ring. I look around confused about what just happened, and where the explosion came from. I hear Sadie let out a terrified scream. I look to see her coated in blood and Nova lying on the ground beside her. Ian turns around, running away from the scene unfolding before us. The look of fear in his face let me know exactly what had just happened. One of the hunters with a rifle had shot Nova. Ian took about 2 steps before another shot rang out. Blood spray came out of the side of Ian's head like a lawn sprinkler. Ian drops mid-stride, pulls her into the nearest tree line, and I hush her violent screams. No additional words are needed as we began to both sprint away from the chaos. I feel terrible about leaving Sadie and Katie to die. But any other action than what I took would have led to all of our deaths. I could hear the hunters scrabbling after us. At least, that's what was running through my mind at that moment. Tessa and I ran full speed for what felt like miles. My legs burned, my lungs hurt, and I would not dare to slow down. To my relief, we stumbled upon the trail. I look around to regain my sense of direction. "The bridge is this way," I yelled to Tessa, and we began sprinting again. We ran to the bridge, where we flagged down a car, and they called the emergency number to alert the police. I was frantic, trying to explain to the officer what I saw, that we ran off, leaving our friends to die. Tessa could only weep. She tried to tell her version, but she couldn't get the words out. Tessa was physically shaking, and instead of words, vomit was the only thing that came from her mouth. Several hours had passed, and the sun was starting to set when the officers found my friends. The hunters had erected 2 wooden crosses that Sadie and Katie hung from. Their abdomens sliced open, and the twins were connected by their intestines tied together. Their guts decorated the wooden structure they hung from like a set of gory Christmas lights. Ian and Nova lay at the foot of the crosses. I don't know the reason behind the gruesome slaughter of my friends, but I do know I'll never revisit the Pacific Crest Trail. This happened a couple of weeks ago. It was a sunny day. My wife and I decided to go hiking and have a picnic. This was in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We got our backpacks out and began hiking when we arrived at a parking area. We eventually came to a river. It seemed like an excellent place to have our picnic. It appeared to be peaceful at first. My wife laid down a blanket and we started pulling out our food. We just had some sandwiches, lemonade, bottled water, and some cookies. Nothing too crazy. It was a lovely day with fantastic scenery. Regardless of all the beauty, I started having an uneasy feeling. I didn't say anything to my wife about the feeling. I didn't want to worry her. A few minutes later, we heard rustling in the trees in the woods. We looked around, but we didn't see anything. My wife says, "I don't like it here." She said she felt spooked from the time we sat down. I thought we were being watched as well. Even the hair on my arms and neck was standing up. We hear more rustling. I told my wife we should start back to the truck instead of finishing our hike. For whatever reason, we decided to leave our food in case it was a hungry animal. I know, this was a dumb idea. We started going back to our truck and my wife said, Do you hear that?" I said, "Yes, just keep walking." There was more rustling behind us, and whatever it was had started to follow us. The footsteps got louder and closer. The footsteps didn't sound like that of a human. Whatever it was big. My wife started to get nervous because we both thought if we left the food behind, we would be okay, and it would just go for the food. I guess we were wrong. I started feeling like we were on the menu for whatever was stalking us. My wife had tears running down her face, and I took her hand and told her to start walking faster. I was afraid for us to run in case whatever was following us was actually a predator, like a mountain lion or a bear, and would start chasing us and run us down. Whatever it was stayed with us, but we couldn't see a single thing. We kept moving, and were getting tired. We still kept going though. Finally, we made it to the parking area where our truck was. I looked around, but I still didn't see anything. We threw the backpacks in and hopped into the truck as fast as we could. I backed up and then put the car into drive. I floored the gas pedal. We were so relieved but also terrified. We didn't say anything for quite a few minutes, but then as we were getting down the road, my wife asked, What do you think it was?" I said, "I have no idea. I'm not sure I really believe in Bigfoot, but I don't think this was a bear. Whatever this was, it was on 2 feet, it sounded big and heavy. It stalked us. I've never been this afraid in my life. We won't ever go back to this area again. It reminded me of a classic horror movie, but this was real. It's only been a few weeks since then, and I'm still scared because I wonder what could have happened if I had not chosen to return to my truck and leave instead of continuing to hike. Thank you, Swamp Dweller, if you tell my story. People should know the importance of being alert to their surroundings in the wilderness. As I've heard others say, I believe there could be things we don't know about." I have a paranormal story I'd like to share with you. For context, I grew up and live in the high desert region of Southern California. Not a lot of cryptid encounters in my experience, thankfully, but plenty of paranormal experiences. My mom has always been a strong believer in the paranormal, so I grew up with an awareness. Additionally, I grew up in a very haunted house. Thus, there have been many experiences for me, my family members, and many friends who have visited. Luckily, though, nearly all the encounters in the house have been harmless. I grew up in a semi-rural suburban area. I spent much of my teens walking around the neighborhoods, and in the hot months, I'd do this nightly. Not the smartest idea, probably, but I'd come to know the neighborhoods very well. That knowledge and trust in my intuition and gut feeling led me to believe that I'd be okay if I ever had any sort of incident. And that seemed to be true, as I never had any really bad experiences until about 5 or 6 years ago. I started seeing this guy, who we'll call Craig. We went on a late night walk to a nearby park. It was maybe 11 p.m.-ish by the time we got to the park. We spent some time walking around and goofing off on the empty playground. Now, from the park, one could easily see the backside surroundings of the adjacent church building. As we were chilling and talking on the play structure, we noticed a light on the side of the building flickering. There was every possibility that it could have just been a faulty light. However, Greg and I got an odd feeling from it. It was ominous. We kind of shook it off and started talking about other stuff, though. We both kept turning our gaze back to the flickering light. The path home took us around the church and through its parking lot anyway, so we decided to go check it out. We made our way through the park, around the building, and into one of its 2 parking lots. The side where the flickering light was a bit past the second parking lot. As we were nearly to the second lot, I got this overwhelming feeling that we just shouldn't go. Whatever was over there definitely wanted to be left alone, and I felt that very clearly. I voiced my feelings to Greg and, though bummed, honored them. We turned to our right and made our way out of the parking lot to the street to begin the walk back to my place. Before long, we were directly across from where the light was flickering. Greg stops and says, "Whatever this thing is, it shouldn't be at a church. I'm going to see if I can send a burst of energy over there to scare it off." And honestly, I was appalled by Greg's odd decision, and even more so at the odd choice of words. But before I could say anything, he turned over to face the flickering light. I don't know if he managed to send a thing of energy or whatever, but he got a reaction nonetheless. The flickering light began to speed up, flashing like a strobe light. Then after just a few seconds it went out. There almost seemed to be a dark energy, darker than the night around us, flooding the space between us and the light. My gut twisted, and my instinct kicked in. "Start walking now," I told him. We both began to walk down the street towards my house. It was about a 1/4 mile walk from where we were going. It didn't take long for us to feel we were being followed. Greg looked back once. I don't know if he saw anything. If he did, he never said. "Don't look back. Don't give it your attention. Just keep walking," I told him. I didn't look back once. Everything in me told me not to look at it and not to show it emotion. I listened and did not look back one time. I kept my head high and my gaze straight ahead. To keep myself from letting my gaze wander, I fixed my gaze on the street light at the next intersection, which was about 25 feet ahead of us. We walked past a house with a flagpole and a flag. I focused on the sound the flag made as it waved in the wind to ground and comfort myself. However, that comfort was short-lived as the sound soon became distorted. It sounded as if someone recorded the flag and then intentionally distorted the sound to make it eerie. I turned my gaze from the streetlight to look at the flag. It seemed too slow in its movements, and I suddenly felt incredibly disoriented. When I looked ahead again, everything seemed abnormal. I can't quite describe it. The street lamp was a different color, and the surroundings looked unfamiliar to me. Greg and I paused for a moment and looked around. He was feeling disoriented too. Mind you, while I can't say for certain about whether or not Greg was on anything, I can guarantee that I was 100% sober. I had not taken, smoked, or drank anything other than bottled water. The short distance felt like ages, but as we walked beneath the street lamp, I saw it change from a greenish color to a purple, then blue, before returning to normal. Only then did the disorienting feeling vanish. Greg paused, breathing semi-heavily as we looked around. Everything seemed perfectly normal. "What the hell was that?" he asked. "I have no idea. We just need to get home." "Keep walking," I told him. We continued to walk home in silence. We both felt like we were being watched, though the feeling grew less intense the closer we got to my street. Later that night I woke up feeling like I was being watched again. I looked out the window and saw nothing, but it felt as though something was watching us from the street. We experienced that several times until I stopped seeing Greg. Then I stopped experiencing that feeling altogether. Whatever it was, it either lost interest or became interested specifically in Greg. Possibly because it was disrupted. I've never spoken to Greg since then, so I have no idea if he had any further encounters with that entity. But for years after, I always felt as though something was watching me every time I drove past that church. Rhode Island is a small state but rich in history and mystery, particularly for those intrigued by the paranormal. My friend and I have always been fascinated by haunted hotspots, and one place that consistently piqued our interest was Tower Hill Road in Cumberland. The road has a notorious reputation, with locals whispering about supernatural sightings and unsettling events. Some claim to have seen the ghost of a little child walking a dog, while others speak of Native American spirits restless from the violence from the French and Indian War. Drawn by these tales, we decided to explore the subject ourselves. It was a chilly, autumn evening when we set out, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over the winding road. As we drove deeper into the countryside, the sense of anticipation grew. Tower Hill Road is only about a mile long, but it feels much longer, like it stretches into another realm. An inexplicable heaviness settled over us as soon as we turned onto the road. The air grew thick, making breathing hard, and a profound silence replaced the usual nighttime sounds. We rolled back down the window slightly, but even the crickets and owls seemed to be avoiding this place. An anxious feeling gnawed at my insides, making me hyper-aware of every rustle and creak around us. We drove slowly, peering into the dense woods on either side. The twisted and gnarled trees cast ominous shadows that danced in the car's headlights. Occasionally, I thought I saw movement at the edge of the light, but it vanished when I tried to focus on it. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the shadows, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. About halfway down the road, we passed an ancient, towering tree that stood out. It was massive, its branches reaching out like skeletal arms. Suddenly, my friend screamed, a blood-curdling sound that shattered the heavy silence around us. She swore she saw a figure standing by the tree watching us with glowing eyes. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the blood drain from my face. I tried to laugh it off, my nervous chuckle sounding hollow and forced, but my entire body felt heavy as lead. Every instinct screamed for me to leave, to get away from this place as fast as humanly possible. We pressed on, and the car was moving at a crawl now. The sense of paranoia was overwhelming, as if unseen eyes were dull into us from the dark. My friend gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin, her eyes wide with fear. She kept glancing back at the tree, convinced something was following us. As we neared the road's end, the dread intensified. The temperature seemed to drop, and I could see my breath fogging the windshield. Suddenly, a dog's mournful howl pierced the night, sending shivers down my spine. The faint, ghostly laughter of a child followed it. We both froze, listening intently, but the sounds faded as quickly as they had came. The oppressive atmosphere lifted instantly when we finally emerged from Tower Hill Road. We pulled over to the side, both trembling, trying to understand what we had experienced. The mile-long road had felt like an eternity, each second stretched by the palpable fear that clung to us. Looking back, I'm unsure what we encountered on Tower Hill Road. Was it spirits of those long gone, or were our minds playing tricks on us in the dark? Either way, the experience left an indelible mark on us. For anyone in Rhode Island or New England, for that matter, looking for an authentic paranormal experience, Tower Hill Road is a place you won't soon forget. But be warned, the road doesn't just lead you through Cumberland. It takes you deep into the unknown, where the past and the supernatural intertwine in the most unsettling of ways. I am a 20-year-old girl, and I've been in tune with the paranormal my entire life. Admittedly, I have become slightly obsessed, not in the summoning demons way, but more with too much research and spending my free time and all day at work, if I'm honest, listening to podcasts like this one. I have many stories to tell, but I decided to start with one that has been weighing on me for quite some time. I moved into a new place in December of 2017 with my new roommate, who we will call Nikki. When we moved in, I felt a massive weight off my shoulders because for the first time, I didn't feel any pressure in my home. Skip forward to May, and things had been going pretty well when we found out a family friend who was 16, we'll call her Morgan, didn't have a place to live, so we invited her to stay with us. I had known this kid for roughly 15 years and knew she came from a messed up family. She told us her dad was a Satanist and had cast some sort of curse on her, and now she was being followed by what she described as a shadow creature. With my past with the paranormal, I believed her but didn't really think anything of it and didn't want to take it too seriously because obviously we had some real emotional issues going on here. A few weeks passed and little inconveniences occurred, such as our coffee table being moved or mail being scattered across the floor. We have cats, so I didn't really think that much of it, but I was pretty annoyed about it. This kept happening, then gradually started getting weirder, like our laundry detergent being poured out under the dining room table, and the empty bottle was set up in the middle of the puddle. At around the same time, both Morgan and Nikki started having issues with sleep paralysis. Nikki used to get it all the time as a kid, but hadn't in years. The strange thing was that despite having separate experiences, both girls claimed to see the same thing. A child-sized black figure. The body was small, the head was too big, the hands were too long. It was always the same description. They couldn't see any other features, just a black outline. Luckily, I didn't have sleep paralysis, and I never have in my life, so I mistakenly thought I was safe. One night I was home alone, and I was in a deep, depressing mood. Everything in the house just felt so heavy that I took a nap on the couch. When I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I felt like someone was pushing on my chest, so I sat up, and the pressure was gone. Then I noticed the room was dark, like unnaturally dark. My TV and the hall light were on, so there was no reason for my little portion of the living room to feel so enveloped in black. I decided to not really think about it, turned the TV up, and started scrolling through my phone. I heard heavy footfall from the kitchen directly behind me a moment later. It sounded like a full-grown man. I thought someone had come into the house while I was asleep, because we always left the sliding glass door in the kitchen unlocked. I know it wasn't the best thing to do, but I've changed since then. Too afraid to turn around and look, I took out my phone and went to Snapchat. I turned on my flash on my screen, and everything went completely black when I switched to the front-facing camera. My flash wouldn't work anymore, so I drew the courage to turn around. I saw nothing, and instantly the room was light again. I grabbed my keys and left until my roommate was off work. A couple of days had passed, and my roommate and I burned sage, oiled all the entrances, and told whatever was in the house that it was not welcome and had to leave. I don't really know where I truly fall on things like this, but I was willing to try anything. I was hoping that would be the end of it, and we didn't have any more things moved. Morgan had moved in with her brother, and the house seemed a bit lighter, except Nikki was still experiencing some pretty extreme sleep paralysis almost every single night. Skip forward a few weeks and I'm laying in bed with my two cats. It's somewhere around 3 a.m. and I heard pots and pans moving in the kitchen. My cats woke up and started growling and hissing, which is out of character for them, so I grabbed my gun and checked every inch and corner of the house. Nikki was still sleeping, so I returned to my room, thinking it could have been maybe her cat, who likes to hide in the cupboards from time to time. 3 loud bangs made me jump so high the second I shut the door that I fell back onto my bed. I yelled for the thing to go away. I didn't want it to hear, and it had to leave. What felt like minutes later, I opened the door and my older cat ran out, turned into the kitchen, and screamed like she was hurt. I looked at her for like an hour, and I couldn't find anything wrong with her. I went to bed crying, because she was acting weird after that. The following day, I woke up, and everybody was asleep beside me normally. Nobody seemed harmed. It just seemed like everybody was a bit freaked out. I woke up my roommate and told her about the night before. She explained that she had been awake when I got up and heard the 3 loud bangs herself, but was way too afraid to get out of bed. We oiled again and brought in her mother, who worked at the church, and she blessed the house. Not too long after Morgan's little brother moved in with me, everything kind of seemed to cease. It makes me wonder if Morgan's dad did curse her. He always told his 3 daughters they were mistakes and that he only intended to have 2 sons. That might explain everything. After she moved in with her older brother, it didn't really bother her anymore, and when her younger brother came to stay with me, the problem seemed to just move away entirely. All I know is whatever it was really negative. My depression had never been worse, and we were constantly arguing in the house. I'm just glad it's over. A little background before we begin. Everyone says the same thing. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I hunt, fish, camp, hike, and kayak. My buddy is not an outdoorsman. He goes party camping with me, and that's about it. We have never experienced anything like what I'm about to tell you. This happened in 2018. The day before, we were camping at a lake in the Nicollet National Forest in northern Wisconsin. The trees were changing color at the time, and the leaves were starting to fall. It was freezing at night, being October. My buddy got cold quickly and drove around in the mornings to warm up. We would go into town to get gas and supplies, mainly beer. There needed to be more to do at our campground, and with no hiking or activities, day drinking is kind of what we relied on, listening to music and talking about party camping. The next day was going to be an overcast, rainy day, so we decided to spend it by driving around, looking at other campgrounds and scouting them out for other trips. We quote-unquote partied that night and went to bed late. Everything was normal. We heard wolves, owls, loons, and all the other good stuff. But after a while, we heard nothing. Just pure quiet. It was peaceful. It started raining early the next day. Just a drizzle at first, but enough to make camping a pain. We got up late, hungover and cold. We dressed in our hiking gear and jumped in the car to get warm. We left the lake campsite a little after noon to check out the other campgrounds. It was about 5 miles to the next one and basically on the highway without privacy. We would generally check them out, but it started raining very hard. We stayed in the car, marking down the campsites we liked and the ones we didn't. This one we didn't really particularly like. Now the thing about this national forest is there are campsites and campgrounds spread out absolutely everywhere. They need to be connected in some sort of way. So you have to get on the highway, find a little sign that says campsites this way, and then drive down a dirt road for 10 to 15 minutes to find them. We made it to about 8 before 5 o'clock. We were at the entrance of what was going to be our last one for the day. It said the road was 15 miles. I went slowly, not trying to kick too many rocks up into my car. The road was honestly pretty eerie. The trees made the street look like we were going down a cave. A couple of minutes in and the rain had stopped. At the campsites, there was no one there. It was beginning to get dark. We had been in the car all day and we were ready to get out and stretch our legs. We parked at the first campsite and got out. The birds were singing their lullabies and everything was still. There were 5 campsites in a circular clearing with thick trees all around. The sites were open to each other and could have been better for my camping. Only if you rented all the sites. Honestly, we walked around the circle and noticed a sign that said group camp pointing up a trail. We started down the gravel path full of wet leaves to the site. After walking for some time, I realized it wasn't even close. I raised this concern with my buddy, but we wanted to see the site anyway. It was almost dark out, but we could still see rather well. I noticed the birds had stopped singing at this point. It was a hushed tone in the forest. All we heard was our own footsteps. We made it to the group site after walking for quite a few minutes. It was still and nothing was moving. We were at the end of the trail looking into the area. The hair on the back of my neck started to stand up, and my skin crawled. Standing, about 30 feet to our left, was a very massive, dark-haired creature. I was frozen with fear. My buddy hadn't noticed it yet and was still walking. I said his name quietly. He must have known something was wrong because he stopped and turned to his left immediately. We were both frozen. I was standing there what felt like minutes, but it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. I knew what it was, but in my head I was saying they weren't real. I couldn't even speak. Then it started slowly moving towards us. It started yelling some deep-throaty gibberish at us. Against all my instincts to hold my ground and fight back, we ran for it. It ran with us, and it was still screaming. We kept running for our lives. It was running parallel to us. Its scream was replaced by what I can only describe as a deep, throaty huffing noise. It was crashing through the dead brush, keeping up with us effortlessly. We were running, trying not to slip on the leaves or just die. We saw the car and had hope. As soon as we got to the clearing, it stopped. It hit a tree, more like it punched through a tree. We heard a huge crack and crash. We were almost to the car when this massive tree hit the ground next to us. We then listened to what can only be described as a great ape beating its chest in triumph while screaming. We jumped in the car and sped away. The rest was a blur. We got back to the campground, packed up and left at night. We never spoke about it again and haven't talked about it since. I'm almost entirely possible what we experienced that day was a Bigfoot. I was younger when this story occurred. Of course, all the adults say kids have a wild imagination, even though my buddy and I swore up and down that this had happened. Anywho, let's get to the story. It was toward the end of the week, and my mom and her boyfriend at the time, I wanted to go up the mountain to his family's cabin. I live north of Wyoming where the Bighorn Mountains reside. As a 12-year-old, I asked my mom if I could bring my buddy. For his safety, his name will be Nick. I called Nick and asked if he wanted to go to the cabin for the weekend. He had to ask his mom, and with our moms being close since they were younger, she said yes. Once we got everything in my mom's boyfriend's pickup, we went ahead and picked him up. As he hopped into the back of the truck, we talked about the general things that typically we would talk about, school, girls, etc. As we got to the cabin on the first day, nothing really major happened. We went four-wheeling and had hot dogs and s'mores, and the first night came and went without incident. The start of the next day is when things began to get a little spooky. The day went normal as much as it could. Towards the afternoon, we stayed around the cabin. My mom kicked us out of the place after lunch. We hiked around the house and we discussed a few different things such as movies, shows, Call of Duty, etc. As well as grabbing a stick and pretending to be in Call of Duty, as weird as it may have sounded. Towards dusk, I showed him the treehouse roughly 70 to 80 yards away from the cabin. The treehouse is a triangular platform 10 feet up in the air made of 2x4s and a makeshift ladder. The platform is between 3 trees on each point in a triangle shape. with rails to help with safety and all that. We had our legs dangling from the platform, talking again with the occasional silence between us talking. The forest became dead, which is a natural sign of a predator being around, which became a big red flag with both of us knowing that, especially with us going hunting every fall. We ended up getting the chills. Nick broke the silence. "Hey, do you see that?" As he struggles to get the sentence out. So that's all the light we had. A feeling of fight or flight. With the sun setting and it being all the light we had, that feeling of fight or flight came through our bodies. We began to hear something crashing through the brush, and in the distance, we saw what I can only describe as a giant, hairy humanoid creature peering at us from behind a tree. That was roughly 50 feet away from us. It was at least 9 feet tall. Once I realized what it could be, the hair on the back of our necks stood up immediately. Our first mistake was looking at each other as shock kicked in. We looked back at where the creature was, and now it was a bit closer. It was kind of like suspense from those movies in like Jurassic Park when the raptor broke through the glass. We both hopped off, and as I'm looking back and forth between Nick and the creature, he hopped down and ran to the meadow in front of the cabin, closer to where we were. Looking back at the beast, I saw it was about 30 yards away. Fear filled my body and I shook without looking away from the beast. I scooted my butt over as I was getting ready to run when I happened to look up and saw this thing face to face. I saw it in its full glory, hair covered head to toe with a brown and blonde mixture of color. With the setting sun putting an orange tint to it, I ended up freaking out as though I had seen death itself. I jumped to the ground, rolling as I hit it, getting up and booking it to the same meadow as my friend. Nick was waiting there already. As I'm running, I hear twigs and sticks breaking behind us. I knew this thing was chasing me. Once I got closer to the meadow, I saw Nick telling me to run. As I got to him, I looked back and saw the creature in the tree line. As we were staring at it, it was staring right back. It did something we will never forget. With us catching our breath, we heard it. It was like a loud roar. We ended up booking it to the front of the cabin, slamming the door shut, and my mom and her boyfriend looked at us puzzled. They were asking us questions and we tried to answer, but as I said, they thought we were crazy. After dinner and having some s'mores, we ended up going to bed. The cabin had an open area upstairs, where the 6 beds were for us kids to hang out in. Towards the back of the upstairs is a screen door. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night to a sound of scratching on wood. The light outside the screen never turns off. I saw a hand scraping the deck floor outside. I freaked out because I swear it was the same hand from that creature.